There? Whoa. Now we're on. Okay, so I can get going. Sounds kind of strange, but he'll get it figured out. Good morning again, everybody that's in their virtual world. I envy you that you got your jammies on and you get your coffee and you can watch it online, but I'm glad that you can. We have a lot of people out camping. Matthew and my brother and sister-in-law and my niece are all whitewater rafting, so they said they had a great time and they're relaxing. So we give them a chance to relax, and then we're going to get him back up and running this next Sunday. So I'm Matthew's uncle. I've been here over 38 years and probably done about everything that this church had to do, from head usher to worship leader to youth leader. So I hope that today you can enjoy a little bit of word from the Lord from Esther. We're going to go through the 10 chapters, and so we have 3 hours. Hopefully, oh, no, we don't have 3 hours. How much time do I get? Do I get like 45 minutes? Or I know this, people look at the clock, but I've noticed that over the years that it doesn't really mean anything to pastors. They look at the clock, but they're still there all the time. So we're going to go through Esther. I think there's one announcement that there's extra food in the foyer. There's apples. There's chips of weird, strange colors and devices, from jalapeno to whatever, seaweed. Yeah, so if you want to get your seaweed in, we have that. But let's pray. Father God, I just thank you that you are here with us. You're always here with us, and you will always be here, Lord, that you're here with us today. I pray that you would touch the word as we go into the book of Esther, Lord, and find out how relevant it is for us today, Lord. I thank you for your word. I thank you for your people, and I thank you for the family here at Wood Street. In Jesus' name, amen. So I put down that we're definitely living in a different world than the one we were half a year ago. The new norm is very strange, but the thing that we can realize that we are exactly where God planned us to be at this time. And that's the theme of Esther, is for such a time as this. God is the perfect gardener. He's planted us where we're supposed to be, the exact year, the exact month, the exact week, the exact day, the exact second that we're supposed to be here. God put us here. So he could have put us 2,000 years ago. He could have planted us 500 years into the future, but he didn't. He put us today. So we have to understand, what is the importance of me being on this earth at this time? So if we're going to go through Esther and see that. And just to give you a little bit of perspective on that, about how special you are, when you were being conceived, you competed against 250 million sperm. And God chose the one and said, that's the one that's going to be you. Is that crazy? I think that's crazy. I think that he said, that's the one that's going to get the egg, and his name's going to be Michael Murrish. He's going to be born on October 8th, 1956, and he's going to do strange things, and he's going to marry this beautiful woman named Gina, and all that crazy stuff. So he knew exactly when you were going to be here. He knew exactly when you were going to be conceived. He knew when you were going to be conceived, and he knew that before even your parents knew that you were going to be conceived. So take comfort in that. So you're already a conqueror. You've already defeated 250 million. That's a feat in itself. So let's get to Esther. I'm going to do this the way I do it, and if you've ever been in one of my Bible studies, it's like we might be here for 30 minutes, or we might be here until... Well, that stopped at 6, so why do we even worry about that? It's 5:45, so we're going to start, and I'm going to do. I've read this probably 8 times this week, so I'm going to do it in a way. I don't know about you, but I don't like to read the word and just read it as words on a page, because I know that God's word does not have an expiration date, that it's relevant. It's not best if used by or best if read by a certain day. It's always relevant, and it's always fresh, and it's always new. You're not going to get chunks in your milk when you read the word. It's going to be fresh. So we're going to read this, and then we're going to see exactly How does this, because I had a whole different sermon about 5 days, 6 days ago, and God said, no, I don't want that. So I had to say, okay, what do you want? He said, I want you to read Esther, and I want you to point things out in that. So I said, okay, I'll do that. So here we go. We're in Esther. We're in chapter 1, and I'm going to read through it. I'm not going to read through the whole thing. I'm going to give you a synopsis of each chapter as we go and what it meant. So this is a whole account of the Jewish people living in Persia about 430 BC. This is a time when there was a remnant that was left that didn't go back to Israel or Jerusalem, and they stayed in Persia. So these are Persian Jews. And it's mostly the author is talking about the celebration of the Purim, which is their deliverance from Haman and almost annihilation. So this is in the 3rd year of Xerxes' rule, and he was the ruler of Persia. He had 127 provinces. He had about 3,256 miles of territory that he ruled, and he wanted to show people. So he got all the people from all the provinces, the 127 provinces, and he spent a half a year showing them all that he had, all the properties, all the provinces. He wanted to show them that because he was thinking about going into Greece, and he wanted these people to be with him. And we all know the major mistake he made in going into Greece. Didn't work. So in the 3rd year of his reign, after going a half a year of showing everybody everything he had, in a half a year, he had a banquet that lasted like 7 days. So these big banquets were pretty major. They were a 7-day deal, lots of drinking, lots of partying, lots of just whatever. So the guys, the king and all his dignitaries, they had their party, and the queen, Vashti, she had all the ladies because they probably didn't want to hang out with the guys while they were partying, because you know how guys are when they party. So the women had their own party. So after about the 7th day, the king's feeling pretty tipsy. He's feeling pretty good about himself. He's been drinking for 7 days, and he told his dignitaries, I want you to see my queen. She is the most awesome, beautiful queen you've ever seen. Told the eunuch, go get the queen. I want to show her to everybody. Tell her to put her crown on and come out. I want everybody to see her. So they're all sitting there and waiting, and no queen. And the eunuch guy comes back and says, she said no. She said no, she's not coming. Well, that just made him furious, because here he is with all his dignitaries and the queen won't come out. So I was thinking, why wouldn't the queen come out? That is really weird. You know, I've read that so many times, but I did the research, and Xerxes, when he passed, he had a son named Darius, who was the next king. And it was exactly about this time that Queen Vashti was probably about 8 months pregnant. So she was probably saying, I really don't feel like putting on my crown, being a big queen right now, being pregnant, and showing myself off to all these drunk guys. So she said no. So the king's like, what are we going to do? I need to talk to all the people that give me counsel. So they said, you know what, you better do something, because now all the women are going to be like, well, the queen said no, so we don't need to obey our husbands, and so you need to do something. So he said, okay, I'll get rid of the queen. Got rid of the queen. She's no longer queen. You can no longer be seen in my presence. You need to get out of here. So that's what happened. Queen Vashti was brought before him, and she wouldn't come. So he said, you know, from now on, you'll never be seen here. You're never going to be queen again. So then later on, a couple years later, the king's like, wow, it's kind of a bummer. I don't have a queen. So his council said, okay, now we're going to do something. Well, let's do this. Let's have a beauty contest, like, you know. Let's do that. We'll get all the women that are virgins, and we'll have them come before you, and you pick out the one you like, and then she could be the queen. So Esther, this is how God works. Esther's like an orphan girl. Her mom and dad have died. She lives with her uncle, or her cousin, I'm sorry. She lives with her cousin. And they say, you're coming with us. So Mordecai is her, I'm trying to think if it's a cousin or her uncle, but anyway, she is brought before the king. She's an orphan. She doesn't have a mom or dad. She's a Jewish girl, which they don't tell anybody because that wouldn't really fly. But she is brought before him, and the king is saying, I like this one. The thing is that's really interesting that I read about that is before you're brought before the king, before this whole pageant thing goes on, you spend 2 years. A year of oils and whatever, and then a year of perfumes and makeup. I mean, that's a long spa day. 2 years of preparing before you could come before the king. And those were all prescribed. So when the turn came for Esther, that was the daughter of his uncle. So Mordecai had adopted the daughter of his uncle, so they were cousins. But he pretty much kept her as a daughter, treated her like a daughter. So in the 10th month, it was 4 years after Vashti, the king decides that he wants Esther. So she gets to move into the palace. Now she's a young orphan girl that was Jewish, and now she's a queen. That's incredible. And most of the Jews at that time had left and went back to Israel, but these ones are the Jews that stayed in Persia. Whether they had a legitimate reason or not, or just disobeyed, they stayed in the Persia, and this was in Susa of Persia. So during this time, Esther's in the palace, and Mordecai is hangs around by the gate. And I was thinking, Mordecai is kind of important, but what is the significance of a gate? I always think of a gate being you're just hanging around, nothing to do. But I uncovered a little bit of importance of what is the significance of a city gate. It said, besides being part of a city's protection against invaders, city gates were places of central activity in biblical times. It was at the city gates that important business transactions were made, court was convened, and public announcements were heralded. Accordingly, it is natural that the Bible frequently speaks of sitting in the gate or of the activities that took place at the gate. In Proverbs, wisdom is personified at the head of the noisy street. She cries out in the gateway of the city. She makes her speech to spread her words to the maximum number of people. So Moses, all the different times, it was a place where people met, important people met and talked and did business. So that's why Mordecai was there. So while Mordecai, is at the gate, he hears these two guards who guard the doorway. They're mad at Xerxes. They don't like him the way they've been treated, so they're going to conspire to have him assassinated. So Mordecai tells the eunuch to tell Esther, hey, I heard a conspiracy that a couple guys are going to kill the king. So they found that out. It was true. They hung him, and it was recorded in the book of the annals in the presence of the king that Mordecai helped uncover this conspiracy that he was going to be assassinated. And it was kind of an important thing because later on in history, Xerxes is assassinated. So I think it was important for Mordecai to tell the king this because I don't know, he wasn't really closely tied to the king, but Esther was. And if Esther was in the presence of somewhere where they were going to assassinate someone and she was there, then she could have been in danger. And also when Xerxes dies and she's no longer king or queen, that's a whole mess too. So then we go into chapter 3. It's a whole different thing. The author starts talking about Haman, and Haman is like an interesting guy. He starts to set up a plot to destroy the Jews. Why would Haman want to destroy the Jews? I was like, why? What is the big deal? Why is he so mad at Mordecai? We've all watched the Veggie Tales and seen the whole Esther book, and it was, the cucumbers and talking and all that. It's a good story, but all of a sudden, Haman is brought up, and he is given by the king. He is elevating him and giving him a seat of honor higher than that of all the other nobles. So I did some studying on Haman. Haman was an Agagite. So that's usually when they take a king, then they name him after those. So King Agag, so he's an Agagite. King Agag was an Amalek. Amaleks hated the Jews. From the very beginning, when they came out of Egypt, the first people that tried to annihilate them were the Amaleks. So God said, from that time on, there will always be war and hatred between the Israelites and the Amaleks. And it was God said that I want you to blot them from out from under the skies. And I think he told Saul was supposed to kill every Amalek. And he didn't. Remember, he kept King Agag and a lot of the nice cows and all that stuff. And Samuel was like, what are you doing? We told you to utterly destroy this people. And he didn't do it. So there was a remnant left, and that's what happened. And now we have Haman, and we have all these issues with the Amaleks because they hate the Jews, and especially the Benjamites. And when Haman finds out that Mordecai is a Benjamite, which is from the tribe that Saul was in, then he's really mad. And the why he's mad is because here's Haman. He's this guy that's been elevated into this higher than anyone else. He walks around. He goes by the gates of the city. Everybody is supposed to bow down in recognition of who he is. And Mordecai is just sitting there, like, whatever. And people are like, hey, did you notice that Mordecai, the Jew, he never bows down to you when you go by? He doesn't even sit up. He's sitting down. He doesn't even stand up and recognize. And it wasn't a bad thing in those days for the Israelites to bow before someone. It wasn't like something that they didn't do. So Haman's getting uptight. He sees this guy, and instead of just destroying Mordecai, which I think he could have got away with, I think he could have had him hung, he decides, I'm going to have Mordecai and every Jew in the province of all 127 provinces, I'm going to have them all wiped out. So I'm going to go to the king and I'm going to say, hey, there's a group of people. I'm not going to tell them that they're Jewish, but I'm just going to say, there's a group of people in your provinces that don't do the same things that we do. They don't follow your laws and they don't do the things that you tell them to do. I think we need to get rid of them. And King Xerxes is one of those guys. He's like, okay, whatever. Here's my signet ring. Just do whatever you want to do. Just pass the law. So you're talking about 357,000 miles that this law has to go out to. So Haman figures it out in January that, okay, well, he rolled the dice and it says, okay, in December, we're going to have, everybody's going to, from all the provinces, going to rise up and kill all the Jews. So he has to send people out from all over these provinces, and it's going to take a long time because it's like the length of California 4 times. They have to go out and ride horses and send out in different languages to all these different provinces, hey, on this day, you guys rise up and kill the Jews within your area and get rid of them. So Mordecai finds this out. He's distraught. He's tearing his clothes. He's wearing sackcloth. You can't go into the palace area wearing that kind of stuff. So he tells Esther, who's been in the palace for about 5 years, she's set. She's got the life of luxury. She doesn't even know really what's going on outside the palace too much. She's enjoying life. Probably got people taking care of her, grapes dropping in her mouth, whatever. She's got it made. And Mordecai's like, hey, we're in trouble. And we need you to go talk to the king and tell him what's happening here. And Esther's like, hey, I can't go to the king. No one can go to the king unless they're announced or the king asks for him. He has a gold scepter, and if he doesn't put the scepter out to you when you walk in, you die. So I haven't seen the king in 30 days. He's had other virgins come up, and he's inspected all of them another time since the time that I was queen. So I don't even know if he even wants to see me anymore. It's been like 30 days since he last called on me. So that's when Mordecai says, listen, Esther, eventually they're going to find out that you're a Jew, and you and your family are going to be destroyed too. But you were designed and you were built and created for such a time as this. Who knows? And the interesting thing about Esther, the book of Esther, is God is never mentioned. The author never mentions God. He never mentions prayer. He never mentions any kind of festivals or anything. It's intentional that he leaves that out so that we can focus on this. But he does know that, I wrote this down, he knows that God controls and directs all the seemingly insignificant coincidences that occur in our everyday lives. So now Esther has to figure out, she knows that this is really important, but she also knows that it's really scary, that she could die, that she has been chosen and put into this place for this time, for this reason. Because it's been, since day one, Satan has used the Amalekites to try to destroy the Jews. And if he could destroy the Jews, he could eventually possibly destroy the fact that Jesus could not come. The Messiah, if you destroy the Jews, the Messiah wouldn't be able to come through, the Redeemer. So he's going to use every way he can. So this is another way that he's trying to destroy all the Jews. So Esther's like, okay, I'm scared. I'm afraid I could die. I don't know if the king even wants to see me anymore. But listen, you tell everyone to fast for 3 days. I'll fast for 3 days and I'll do it. So Esther says, okay, this is the words that Mordecai said. He said, do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will rise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to royal position for such a time as this. So, Esther's request to the king. So this is just an incredible play, if they did a play on this, because Esther comes to the king. He puts his scepter out in front and says, okay, you can come. So the king's like, what do you want? Whatever you want. And so he must really still love her, because he says, whatever you want, you can, up to half of my kingdom. That's crazy. Up to half of my kingdom, you can have whatever you want. And Esther's like, well, all I want is for you and Haman to come to a banquet that I'm going to do. Okay. So the king tells Haman, hey, Esther wants just you and me to have a banquet together. So Haman's really puffed up now. He's like, wow. He said, this is crazy. So he's all puffed up. He's like, I am so important. You know, he goes and has this meal. And on the way back from the meal he's walking down, and he goes sees at the gate, and there's Mordecai sitting there, doesn't do anything. He's so mad. He goes, I can't believe this. You know, this Mordecai, this Jew, it's infuriating. So he gets home and he tells his wife, I just had the best dinner. I'm one of the most important people to the king. I'm walking home and there's this Mordecai and he won't even stand up and recognize me. I'm so mad. His wife says, well, just build a 75-foot gallows and go tell the king that you want to hang this guy. So Mordecai's like, okay. I'll calm down and I'll do that. His wife and his friends all said, have a gallows built 75 feet high and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai hanged on it. Then go with the king to the dinner and be happy, because Queen Esther said, I want to have another banquet, one more. And the king's like, okay. So this 75-foot high gallows, that's crazy. And I was talking to Jean. I said, the Persians didn't kill you by hanging you. They killed you by the sword or whatever, and then they hung you up on the gallows for display. You know, that's how they did it. So there's this guy 75 feet high. That's up pretty high. That's so everyone can see you from anywhere. So Mordecai, at this time, in between, we're not talking like when I was reading this, when I used to read Esther, I used to think, man, this was a fast thing. This was probably like a month. But it's not. 5 years, Esther's in the palace, all this stuff is going on. Mordecai finds out these 2 guards are hung, all this stuff. It's written down in the annals. So this is how God works. So all this time, all this planning that Mordecai is going to get killed, hung on the gallows, Haman's got it all figured out. We know exactly when all the Jews are going to be destroyed. Everyone's going to be annihilated. We will get rid of all the Jewish people. We won't have to deal with that. I'm having a dinner. I'm doing good. I got another dinner coming up tomorrow. So Haman's sleeping at night. King can't sleep. I can't sleep. I need something, and I've read about it before. When the kings can't sleep, they get some guy to read them about all the stuff that's gone on over the years. So he gets his book of the Chronicles, the record of his reign, to be brought in and read to him. So it just happens, we're going to say it just happens, but it's actually divine intervention that God has the guy that's reading the book of the Annals turn to 5 years ago when the assassination attempt was there. And he says, it was found recorded there that Mordecai had exposed these two guys, the king's officers who guarded the doorway, who had conspired to assassinate the king. So the king's like, wow, what honor did we do for Mordecai on that? That was incredible. And they said, we didn't do anything. We didn't do anything? Well, we need to do something. Who's in the court? Now, Haman had just entered the outer courts because he was planning to go tell the king, I want to hang I want to hang Mordecai. So he was there. They said, Mordecai's there. So his attendant answered, Haman is standing in the court. Bring him in, the king ordered. When Haman entered, the king asked him, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor? So Haman's like, okay, more honor to me. So let me see, what would I want done for myself? Okay, well, let's put the king's robe, a robe that the king has worn. He gets to ride on a horse that the king has ridden on, and some guy is going to stand before and say, for the man the king delights to honor, have them bring a royal robe, have him put the horse, and then say, let the robe and horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes, and let them robe the man the king delights to honor, and lead him on the horse through the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. So he's thinking, this is going to be great, man. I'm going to be going up and down the streets. People are going to be saying this to me. And the king says, good, I like that. Go get Mordecai and do that for him. What? I hate him. I despise the Jews. So he has to lead a horse, a royal horse, with Mordecai on the king's robes up and down the province, saying this is what the king does to those that he delights in. Can you imagine? I mean, this is incredible. So this is just one chink. He's like, this has got to be the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to me. He goes home, he's hiding his face, he's telling his wife and everybody, he told his wife and said to her, since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is a Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin. While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuch comes and says, okay, it's time for dinner too. He's like, oh man, now he's got to go to this banquet, and he's got to try to figure out, okay, I was going to hang Mordecai in this gallows, and now I had to lead him around and tell what a great person he is. Now I got to go back to the banquet and try to clean up this mess. So the king and Haman went to dine with Queen Esther, and they were drinking wine on the second day. The king asked the queen again, now what was it you wanted? Up to half of my kingdom you can have. Just let me know. And Queen Esther answered, if I found favor with you, O king, and it pleases your majesty, grant me my life. This is my petition. The king's like, what do you mean grant you your life? Well, this guy right here wants to kill me and all my family and all the Jews in all your province. He's like, what? He said, are you kidding me? He was so infuriated, he left. And that's how Xerxes was. He just went into this rage, and he went into the garden, and he's trying to calm down. He can't even speak, and he comes back in because he knows what he's going to tell him. And at that time, Haman's like, oh man, Queen Esther, please let me trip, falls, lands on the couch, on the queen, and the king comes in, and he's like, really? After all this, you're trying to molest my wife, the queen? So he's just like, okay, I'm done. So he said, then Haman was terrified, and the king got up in a rage, left his wine, and went into the palace garden. Haman fell. The king exclaims, will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house? As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. The king said, hang him on the gallows that he was going to use for Mordecai. So that's when it says the king's fury subsided. So then Esther gets it to where the king does an edict for all, he changes it. Mordecai gets to wear the signet ring. Mordecai is brought up and lifted up in honor. He gets to wear the robes. He's like only second in command to the king. So Mordecai arranges this new edict that goes out that says the Jews can defend themselves against these people that are trying to kill them. So it ends up to where they kill 75,000 Persians. And it's really strange because the king's like, well, I guess you killed like 5,000 Persians today, huh? In the province of Susa, where the citadel was. He said, now what? And he said, well, we're going to kill another 70,000, which, as the king and the Persians, he's just like, okay, whatever happens. So that's where the celebration of Purim comes from. It's a celebration where the Jews celebrate their liberation. They celebrate the fact that they were saved from extinction, and just it's something that they still do to this day. So it was like Esther played that part, even though sometimes you wonder if this book should have been called Mordecai, but it's not. It's Esther, because she rose up. It's easy for, like what I was thinking, it's easy like for a person like Mordecai maybe to tell someone to do something, but it's hard for the person that's told to do something to do it. Mordecai told Esther, you need to go talk to the king, and she had to say, I might die, but I need to do it. So she was raised up for such a time as that. So how does that relate? I said, God, how does that even relate to what we're talking about with this pandemic and COVID and all this other stuff? How am I supposed to relate that to now? And like I said, God's word does not have an expiration date, and he did show me some things that, how do we, as a people that know that we were born and brought into this world for such a time as this, what do we do as a church and as a people? Because right now, I think the church needs to be the hands and feet of Jesus to the people that are outside of these walls. There are people that are hurting. There are people that are scared. There's people that have lost loved ones and they have no one to hug them, no one to tell them that they have hope, and no one to let them know that someone is thinking about them. I know we're living in this virtual world now where people are listening to the word, they're listening to their music, and we didn't do worship this morning this way. We're going to do it, I guess, afterwards, because all I know how to do is play the trombone, and I didn't really think that would bring you into the foot of the throne. So, and I didn't want to scare people in the morning when they're watching it online with their coffee as a trombone player. That's really not going to be the thing. So I guess they're going to do worship later with some music. But I know that when I go to Safeway in the morning every day to pick up the donuts, I make it a thing for me that I talk to different people that work there. How are you? I know certain women that are there. I know an older lady named Dee that's cancer-free, and she's doing well. I talked to her. I know of one of the ladies that's not there right now because she's having issues and had an operation. I know that there's a lady in the bakery that has a bad foot right now, and I make it a point to touch and talk to different people that are in that store and to be personal with them. I know that people that come into my store, then ones that feel okay about it, I give them a hug, or I'll pray with them, or I'll hold their hand and pray. I'm not unwise, and I know that there's things you need to do to make sure that you don't transmit this COVID, but I know that we are separated from the world. And I read a little thing in here. This was interesting. I wrote this down for you. And I'm not saying this stuff here for you to be like, okay, well, we can do whatever we want. I wrote, some people worry about their safety while trying to spread the gospel and not spread the COVID virus. As we use common sense, we know that God is always with us. We are separated from the world while being in the world. In Exodus, while the plagues were being put on Egypt to force Pharaoh to let the people go, God's people were not subject to the plagues. Exodus 8:22-23. But on that day I will deal differently with the land of Goshen where my people live. No swarms of flies will be there, so that you will know that I, the Lord, am in this land. Exodus 9:4, but the Lord will make a distinction between the livestock of Israel and that of Egypt, so that no animal belonging to the Israelites will die. Exodus 9:26, the only place it did not hail was the land of Goshen where the Israelites were. And Exodus 10:23, no one could see anyone else or leave his place for 3 days, yet all the Israelites had light in the place where they lived. You know, I believe that we are separated from, and I know that God protects us when we go to do things, but that's not saying that someone is not going to get sick and die as they go to help spread the word for the Lord, but I'm just saying that we need to be the hands and feet at this time. That's why you're here. God knew that each one of us and all of his people could deal with it. You know, we don't know who couldn't deal with it 500 years ago or 10 years ago. We don't know if our parents could have dealt with this kind of COVID thing, you know, but God knew that we could, and that we'll rise above it. So Mordecai, he played an important part, and this is something pretty cool that I found out, and it's just a little something to clench for you. I have it written here. Listen to this. This will tie it all together. I like this. Billy Graham, he died at the age of 99, and they were talking to him when he was still, right before he died, and they were talking to him about where he got saved as a young man. He said he went into a revival in Charlotte, North Carolina in 1934, and this man was preaching and looked at Billy Graham and said, "You're a sinner," and it hit him. And this man was just doing what he was supposed to do. He played the part at the time, so such a time as this. So I was looking, I go, who was that man? Who was that man in North Carolina that led Billy Graham to Christ? Guess what his name was? Mordecai Ham. I thought, okay, Lord, that's pretty cool. You know, that's just over and above. So the last thing I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about a few things, because I know a lot of us are like, what can we do? What can I do at such a time as this that I could actually be effective for the Lord? And I was looking at a few things that we could actually do. Look at it, rustling papers. You don't see that much anymore. I see Matthew and he's like, click, click. One thing we can do is we can gather safely in smaller groups. You know, we could gather and do, like Steve's going to be doing a Bible study, I think, on Monday again, or is it Wednesday? We're going to be doing that. Offer family discipleship plans. We could post how-to videos. If you do something really cool, people could get on and watch and see, like, you know, if you're an excellent baker and you want to show people how to make this great pie, or if you refinish furniture like I do, I could show people how to do this or that. Just kind of cool things like that, which could bring us together. I know in this virtual world of worship, Gina plays worship music in the house all day. So when you come in and when I hear her singing that, it lifts my spirit. And you could do that if you can't, you know, if you can't worship together as a congregation, to have it in your house all day to give you strength and encouragement. You could partner elderly members with younger members, or younger members with elderly members that need some help. You could actually go around your neighborhood if you have if they have post boxes or mailboxes, and put a little note in there saying, hey, thinking about you guys during this time. If you have anything you need, if you need me to go to the store, if you want me to pray for you, just let me know. Here's my phone number, you know. That's what we need to do, because at this time with this pandemic, it seems like the church is shrinking down, and, you know, we're so used to being in this building, and then we need to do like what Matthew was saying. We need to be the 7-day church. And when we started that, now after this pandemic, it's almost like a lot of people are like, well, put that on hold. I'll just stay home and just see what happens, and we'll write it out. Well, it's been a half a year. You can save a lot of people in a half a year. You know, I think just that pastor that brought Billy Graham to the Lord, they said there was something like 80 evangelists came out of that or more, just from his revivals. Mordecai Ham, remember that? What a name, Mordecai Ham. But I hope maybe you learned a little bit from Esther. See, when I read the word, like when I read a story like Esther, I don't want to just read over it and say, okay, I read that. But man, when you start digging and sifting out the word, you see how all these coincidences and all these what seemingly be insignificant situations, but God has his hand in every one of those. Every decision that someone else makes that affects you, God has a way to make that work out. You know, it might be a hard one. It might be something that you're like, this is miserable, I don't like it, and God's like, I know, but you need to go through it. Because when you come out the other side, you're going to be really good. You know, so I hope that you learned something. I don't know, it's still 10 to 6, so I don't know how long it's been. The clock doesn't work, but every time Greg looked at his watch, it didn't mean anything, right? Just kept going. What time is it? 10:40. Is that about right? Wow. So I guess Caleb's going to turn on some music or something. I don't know. But let's pray.